The summer of 1827 descended upon the Whitlock plantation like a suffocating blanket, thick with humidity and the stench of human misery. In the heart of Georgia's cotton country, Thomas Whitlock ruled his vast estate with an iron fist and a leather whip, his reputation for cruelty extending far beyond the property's boundaries. His slaves worked from dawn until their bodies collapsed, picking cotton under the merciless sun, their backs bearing the scars of his drunken rages. Among them was Isaac, a 19-year-old man born into bondage, whose mother had been sold away when he was 12, whose father had died in the fields when he was 7. Isaac had learned early to keep his eyes down, his voice soft, his presence invisible, survival skills that had kept him alive in a world designed to break him. Eleanor Whitlock stood at the window of the main house, watching the slaves move through the cotton fields like shadows. She was 24 years old, educated in Boston, the daughter of a shipping merchant who had fallen on hard times and married her off to Thomas Whitlock for financial security. 3 years into this marriage, she understood the full horror of her mistake. The elegant plantation house was a gilded prison, and she its unwilling captive. Thomas's drinking had worsened each year, and with it, his violence. The slaves feared him, but Eleanor feared him differently, intimately, privately, in the darkness of their bedroom where bruises could be hidden beneath long sleeves and high collars. It was a Tuesday evening in late August when the candle fell. Eleanor had been reading in the upstairs library, one of the few pleasures Thomas still allowed her, when she heard shouting from below. She smelled smoke before she saw it, acrid and thick, curling up the stairwell like a living thing. Thomas had knocked over a candelabra in his drunken stupor and stumbled outside, leaving the flames to spread across the drawing-room curtains, up the walls, consuming everything in their path. The house servants fled in terror, screaming warnings as they ran. No one thought to check if Eleanor was still inside. Isaac had been returning from the stables when he saw the flames engulfing the west wing. He watched the other slaves scatter, heard the overseer shouting orders to form a bucket line, saw Thomas Whitlock stumbling across the lawn, his face red with rage and alcohol. But Isaac's eyes traveled upward to the second-floor window, where a figure moved behind the smoke-darkened glass. Mrs. Whitlock, trapped. Every fiber of his being screamed at him to run, to hide, to let fate take its course. A slave who entered the master's house uninvited could be hanged. A slave who touched the master's wife for any reason could be castrated and lynched. But Isaac saw something in that moment that transcended the brutal calculus of survival. A human being about to burn alive, alone, and terrified. He ran. The heat hit him like a physical blow as he crashed through the front door. Smoke filled his lungs, choking him, blinding him. He dropped to his knees where the air was clearer and crawled toward the staircase. The fire roared around him, a living monster devouring wood and fabric and everything it touched. His shirt caught fire, and he rolled, smothering it, the pain searing across his shoulder and arm. He kept moving. Eleanor had collapsed near the library door, overcome by smoke. Isaac found her crumpled on the floor, her fine silk dress blackened with soot. He didn't hesitate. He lifted her into his arms, knowing that this single act of touching her could mean his death, even if he saved her life, and carried her back through the inferno. A ceiling beam crashed down inches from them. The staircase groaned and shifted. Isaac's lungs burned worse than his shoulder as he staggered through the front door and onto the lawn. Eleanor clutched against his chest. He laid her gently on the grass and collapsed beside her, coughing violently. She wasn't breathing. Without thinking, Isaac tilted her head back and pressed his mouth to hers, breathing air into her lungs as he'd once seen a field doctor do for a drowning child. Once, twice, 3 times. Eleanor gasped and coughed, her eyes fluttering open. For one suspended moment, their faces were inches apart, his lips still near hers, his hands cradling her head. Their eyes met, truly met, and something passed between them that had no name, no language, no place in their world. Then reality crashed back in. Thomas Whitlock seized Isaac by the burned shoulder and hurled him backward. "Get your filthy hands off her!" He kicked Isaac in the ribs, then again. "You touched her! You put your mouth on her!" The other slaves watched in frozen horror as their master's boot connected with Isaac's stomach, his face, his chest. Eleanor screamed for him to stop, but Thomas backhanded her across the mouth, silencing her. It was the overseer, Patterson, who finally pulled Thomas away. "Sir, sir, the boys saved her life. The whole house saw it. If you kill him now, there'll be questions from the neighbors, maybe even the authorities. He's valuable property, sir." The cold economic calculation in those words, valuable property, was what finally penetrated Thomas's rage. He spat on Isaac's prone body and stormed away, shouting for more whiskey. Eleanor knelt beside Isaac, her hands hovering over his battered form, not daring to touch him again, but desperate to help. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry." Blood ran from Isaac's nose and mouth. His left eye was already swelling shut. But through the pain, he looked at her and saw tears streaming down her soot-stained face, and he understood something that would change both their lives. She was as much a prisoner as he was, just in a different kind of chains. The days following the fire passed in a haze of pain for Isaac. He'd been thrown into the slave quarters with his wounds uncleaned, left to heal or die as nature decided. But on the third night, he woke to find a shadow in his doorway. Eleanor had come, carrying bandages and salve stolen from the main house. A lantern turned low in her trembling hands. "Please," she whispered, "let me help you. It's my fault you're hurt." Her presence there was madness. If anyone discovered the master's wife tending a slave's wounds in the dead of night, the consequences would be unspeakable. But Isaac saw the desperate need in her eyes, the guilt that was eating her alive, and he nodded. She cleaned his burns with gentle hands, her touch so different from anything he'd known in his 19 years of life. She wasn't treating him like property or livestock. She was treating him like a person. As she worked, she talked softly about Boston, about books, about her childhood before Thomas, about the dream she'd once had. Isaac listened, saying little, but his silence was attentive, present. When she asked him about his life, he hesitated at first, then began to speak. He told her about his mother, sold away to a plantation in Mississippi, about the songs the slaves sang in the fields that kept their spirits alive, about the stories the old people told of Africa, a place none of them had ever seen, but all of them carried in their blood. Eleanor returned the next night, and the next. She brought food, actual food, not the cornmeal and salt pork scraps the slaves received. She brought books and read to him by lantern light, her voice soft and musical. They talked about everything and nothing, building a connection that grew stronger with each forbidden visit. Isaac felt something awakening inside him that he'd thought the plantation had killed long ago. Hope. Not just hope for freedom, but hope that he could be seen, truly seen, by another human being. For Eleanor, these nights became the only moments when she felt alive. In Isaac's quiet intelligence, his dignity despite everything the world had done to crush it, she found something she'd never found in Thomas or the shallow society of plantation aristocracy: genuine humanity. She began to understand that the education she'd been so proud of, the books she'd read, the refined culture of Boston, all of it had been built on a foundation of deliberate blindness to the suffering that made it possible. One night, 3 weeks after the fire, as summer began its slow retreat into autumn, Eleanor asked Isaac a question that had been burning inside her. If you could go anywhere, be anyone, what would you choose? Isaac was silent for a long time. The question was dangerous, dangerous to imagine, dangerous to want, dangerous to speak aloud. "I'd go north," he finally said, "to a place where a man's worth isn't measured by the color of his skin. I'd learn to read and write properly. I'd find my mother if she's still alive. He stopped, his voice catching. I'd be free. Eleanor's hand found his in the darkness, and they both froze at the contact. This was the line they hadn't crossed, the final boundary. Talking was one thing, this was another, but neither of them pulled away. Eleanor's fingers interlaced with his, and they sat there in the slave quarters, two people from different worlds whose lives should never have touched, holding hands like it was the most natural thing in the world. I dream of the North too, Eleanor whispered. Sometimes I think I'm as much a slave as anyone on this plantation. Thomas owns me as surely as he owns you. The law gives him that right. If I try to leave, he can drag me back. Everything I brought to this marriage became his property the moment we wed. Even my body isn't my own. Her voice broke. Sometimes I envy you. Isaac pulled his hand away as if burned. You envy me. The words came out harsh, angry. You envy being whipped for looking at someone wrong. Envy watching your family sold away like cattle. Envy working until your hands bleed and your back breaks. Envy knowing that anything you say or do could get you killed. He stood, pacing the small space. Your cage is lined with silk, Mrs. Whitlock. Mine is made of scars. The truth in his words hung between them like a physical barrier. Eleanor sat very still, tears sliding down her cheeks. You're right, she said finally. I'm sorry. I have no right to compare my suffering to yours. She looked up at him, her eyes red and desperate. I just wanted you to understand that I see you, Isaac. Not as a slave, as a man. And I'm so desperately lonely. The confession shattered something inside Isaac. He saw her then not as the master's wife, not as the untouchable symbol of everything he could never have, but as another trapped soul, different, yes, but suffering in her own way. He sat back down beside her. I see you too, he said quietly. And you're the first person in this place who's ever made me feel like I'm more than property. That was the night their relationship shifted from compassion to something far more dangerous. It wasn't lust or even romance at first. It was recognition. Two people who'd been invisible to the world suddenly visible to each other. But visibility, as they would learn, could be the most dangerous thing of all. Autumn stripped the trees bare and brought cooler nights that made Eleanor's visits less risky. The slaves were less likely to be awake, and the darkness came earlier. She and Isaac developed an elaborate system of signals. A lantern in a certain window meant Thomas was passed out from drink and it was safe. A white cloth on the porch railing meant stay away. They were careful, so careful, but Thomas Whitlock was not as drunk and oblivious as they thought. Patterson, the overseer, noticed it first, the way Mrs. Whitlock's eyes lingered on Isaac when he worked near the house, the unusual concern she showed for his welfare. One November morning, when Thomas was sober enough to listen, Patterson spoke carefully. Sir, I don't mean to overstep, but I think there's something you should know about your wife and that slave boy, Isaac. Thomas's face went purple. If you're suggesting. I'm not suggesting anything improper has happened, sir, Patterson said quickly. But she watches him. And he was the one who carried her out of the fire, put his mouth on hers, a thing like that. Sometimes it creates feelings where there shouldn't be any. It might be wise to sell the boy, just to be safe. Send him downriver to the cotton farms in Mississippi. Out of sight, out of mind. Thomas didn't sell Isaac. Not yet. Instead, he began to watch. He saw Eleanor's furtive glances toward the slave quarters. He noticed that Isaac had healed remarkably well from his injuries, suspiciously well for a slave with no medical care. He started tracking Eleanor's movements, noting the nights when she claimed headaches and retired early, the times when she took long walks alone in the evening. Meanwhile, Isaac and Eleanor had crossed another boundary. It happened on a cold October night when Eleanor came to his quarters, shaking from one of Thomas's rages. He'd beaten her badly this time. There were bruises on her arms, her face, her ribs. Isaac felt something break inside him when he saw her pain. Without thinking, he pulled her into his arms, holding her while she sobbed against his chest. "I can't keep living like this," she whispered. "I can't. Every day I think about different ways I could end it. The river, laudanum, my father's old pistol that Thomas keeps in his study. I'm so tired, Isaac. I'm so tired of being afraid." Isaac held her tighter. "Don't say that. Don't ever say that." He pulled back to look at her face, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "You're stronger than this. Stronger than him. You've survived this long. You can survive until there's a way out." "But there is no way out," Eleanor said. "Not for me. Divorce would make me a social pariah, and Thomas would never grant one anyway. If I try to leave, he'll find me and bring me back. The law is on his side. I'm trapped here until one of us dies." "Then we'll find a way to escape," Isaac said, the words coming out before he could stop them. "Both of us. We'll go north, where you can be free of him, and I can be free of this." Even as he said it, he knew the insanity of the idea. A white woman and a black slave, running away together. They'd be hunted like animals. If caught, Isaac would be tortured to death, and Eleanor would be locked away in an asylum or return to her husband in disgrace. But in that moment, with her in his arms and desperation driving them both, it seemed like the only option. Eleanor looked up at him, her eyes wide. "You'd risk that? For me?" "I'd risk anything to be free," Isaac said. "And I—" He stopped, afraid to finish the sentence. But Eleanor finished it for him. "And you care about me?" It wasn't a question. Her hand came up to touch his face, and Isaac closed his eyes at the contact. This was so far beyond any line they should have crossed. A slave and the master's wife. A black man and a white woman. In the South in 1827, there was no greater taboo, no more dangerous transgression. "God help me," Isaac whispered. "I do." Eleanor kissed him. It was soft and brief and terrifying, a kiss that could get them both killed, but neither pulled away. When it ended, they stared at each other in shock and horror and something that felt dangerously close to love. "We have to stop," Isaac said, his voice shaking. "This is... Eleanor, they'll lynch me, and they'll destroy you." "I know," she said. But she didn't leave. She stayed there in his arms, and they held each other through the night, not speaking, not kissing again, just existing together in a small pocket of time where the brutal rules of their world couldn't quite reach them. But Thomas Whitlock was closing in. The next morning, he summoned Isaac to the main house. Isaac went, heart pounding, certain this was the end. Thomas stood in his study, glass of whiskey in hand despite the early hour, studying Isaac with cold calculation. "You saved my wife's life," Thomas said finally. "Patterson tells me that should make you valuable, that I should reward such loyalty." He circled Isaac like a predator. "But I don't trust you, boy. I don't trust the way you look at her or the way she looks at you. I think there's something unnatural going on, something that needs to be corrected." Isaac kept his eyes down, his body tense. "I don't know what you mean, Master." Thomas's fist crashed into Isaac's jaw, sending him sprawling. "Don't lie to me. I've seen the way she hovers around you, the way you straighten up when she walks by. Did you touch her? Did you put your filthy hands on her when you carried her from the fire?" "Only to save her life, sir." Isaac tasted blood in his mouth. "Nothing more. I swear it." Thomas kicked him in the ribs. "I think you're lying. I think you've been sneaking around, getting ideas above your station. So here's what's going to happen. I'm going to teach you a lesson about your place in this world. Tomorrow morning, you're going to be whipped. 20 lashes, in front of all the other slaves, so everyone remembers what happens when you forget what you are." Isaac felt his blood run cold. 20 lashes could kill a man or leave him crippled for life. He knew slaves who'd never recovered from such beatings. "Please, Master, I've done nothing wrong." "You exist," Thomas snarled. "That's wrong enough. Get out of my sight." Eleanor learned of Isaac's punishment from a house slave who whispered it while serving her breakfast. Her hands shook so badly she dropped her teacup, porcelain shattering across the floor. Thomas watched her reaction with satisfaction. "Something wrong, my dear?" he asked with false concern. "You can't do this," Eleanor said, her voice low and furious. "He saved my life. He's done nothing to deserve—" "He's my property," Thomas interrupted. "I'll do with him as I please. And if you protest too much, wife, people are going to wonder why you care so much about a slave's welfare." The threat was clear. Defend Isaac too openly, and she'd confirm Thomas's suspicions, making everything worse for both of them. Eleanor spent the night in agony, pacing her room, trying desperately to think of a way to stop this. She considered confronting Thomas again, begging him, but knew it would only make him more determined. She thought about helping Isaac escape before morning, but the plantation was locked down tight at night, and any attempt would be discovered. She felt utterly helpless, trapped by the same structures that had always constrained her, unable to save the one person who'd made her feel alive. The next morning dawned gray and cold. The entire slave population was assembled in the yard between the slave quarters and the main house. 63 men, women, and children forced to watch as Thomas made his point. Isaac was brought out shirtless, his wrists bound to a whipping post. Eleanor watched from an upstairs window, Thomas having forbidden her to go outside, tears streaming down her face. Thomas himself held the whip, a 9-tailed leather monster designed to shred flesh. "Let this be a lesson," he announced to the assembled slaves. "About respect, about obedience, about knowing your place." He drew back his arm. The first lash opened Isaac's back like a blooming flower of blood. Isaac gritted his teeth, refusing to scream. The second and third followed in rapid succession. By the fifth, Isaac's legs buckled, but the ropes held him upright. By the 10th, his back was a mass of torn flesh, blood running down his legs and pooling in the dirt. The slaves watched in horrified silence. They'd all been here before, or knew they could be next. Eleanor couldn't watch anymore. She ran from her room, down the stairs, and burst out the front door. "Stop! Thomas! Stop! Please!" She ran toward the whipping post, but Thomas caught her around the waist. "Get back in the house!" He dragged her away from Isaac, away from the other slaves. "You're making a spectacle of yourself." "You're killing him!" Eleanor screamed, fighting against his grip. "You're going to kill him, and for what? For nothing. He saved my life." Thomas's eyes narrowed. "Is that all he did? Save your life?" His voice dropped to a deadly whisper. "Tell me the truth, Eleanor. Has he touched you? Have you let him touch you?" Eleanor went very still. In that moment, she made a choice that would determine both their fates. She could deny everything, play the outraged innocent, let Isaac take his punishment alone. Or she could tell a truth that was both less and more than what Thomas suspected. That yes, Isaac had touched her, but not in the way Thomas meant. That he'd touched her heart, her soul, her humanity in ways Thomas never had and never could. "He's shown me more kindness and respect than you've shown me in 3 years of marriage," she said, her voice steady despite her tears. "He's treated me like a human being, not property. He's listened to me, talked with me, seen me as a person. So yes, Thomas, he's touched me, and I'm grateful for it." Thomas's face went white with rage. He shoved Eleanor away so hard she fell, then turned back to Isaac, raising the whip again. But before he could bring it down for the 11th stroke, a voice rang out across the yard. "Mr. Whitlock! Sir, stop!" It was Patterson, running from the fields. "Sir, there's a group of men at the front gate, abolitionists from the city, saying they heard reports of excessive cruelty on your plantation. They're threatening to bring the authorities." Thomas froze, whip raised. The timing was impossibly fortunate. Or perhaps not. Perhaps one of the house slaves had found a way to get word out, to summon help. Thomas looked at Isaac's bleeding form, at Eleanor sobbing in the dirt, at the 63 witnesses who'd seen everything. His cruelty was his right under law, but even in the South, there were limits to public brutality, especially with abolitionists making noise. "Cut him down," Thomas snarled. "Lock him in the barn. I'll finish this later." He stormed toward the house to deal with the visitors, leaving Isaac to collapse in the dirt, barely conscious. Eleanor crawled to Isaac's side, no longer caring who saw. She cradled his head in her lap, her tears falling on his battered face. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "This is all my fault. All of it." Isaac's swollen eyes opened slightly. "Not your fault," he managed through cracked lips. "Never your fault." His hand found hers, and he squeezed weakly. "Eleanor, you have to get away from here. He'll kill you too, eventually." "Not without you," Eleanor said, and in that moment she meant it absolutely. "Isaac, we have to run, both of us. Tonight, before Thomas finishes this." 2 slaves helped carry Isaac to the barn, where they laid him on a bed of straw. Eleanor followed, ignoring the shocked stares and whispers. She sent for water and clean cloth, and began tending Isaac's wounds with shaking hands. The overseer, Patterson, appeared in the doorway, looking conflicted. "Mrs. Whitlock, this isn't proper," he said uncomfortably. "You shouldn't be here." Eleanor looked up at him with eyes that had gone cold and hard. "Proper? Nothing about this is proper. Now either help me or get out, but don't tell me what I should and shouldn't do." Patterson hesitated, then sighed. "The abolitionists are gone. Your husband sent them away with promises that he runs a humane operation, that this was a rare disciplinary matter. But Mrs. Whitlock," he lowered his voice, "he's planning something for tonight. I heard him talking to some men from town. Bad men. They're going to take the boys somewhere quiet and finish him. And ma'am, I think he might be planning something for you too. He's talking about sending you back to your father, claiming you've gone mad with women's hysteria. He's already written letters." Eleanor felt ice flood her veins. Thomas was going to kill Isaac and lock her away, erasing the evidence of his suspicions and his shame. She looked down at Isaac's torn back, at his face gray with pain and blood loss, and she knew with absolute clarity what she had to do. Eleanor spent the afternoon preparing with the cold efficiency of someone who knew their survival depended on perfect execution. She gathered supplies from the main house while Thomas was occupied with plantation business. Bread, cheese, dried meat, a water flask, a map of the region she'd found in his study, and 2 items that made her hands shake. Thomas's emergency cash box containing nearly $500 and his pistol. She also gathered something more precious: information. Through the slave network, a communication system she'd never fully understood until now, word spread quickly about Eleanor's needs. An elderly slave woman named Ruth approached her in the kitchen. "There's a place," Ruth whispered. 20 miles north, past the river crossing. A farm run by Quakers. They help people trying to reach freedom. You need to get there before dawn, then hide during the day. Travel only at night. Follow the North Star." She pressed something into Eleanor's hand, a small compass carved from wood. "My son made this before they sold him away. Use it." Eleanor's throat tightened. "Ruth, if Thomas finds out you helped us..." "I'm 73 years old," Ruth said quietly. "What more can he do to me that hasn't already been done? You save that boy. He's young enough to have a real life if you can get him north. And Mrs. Whitlock, I've been watching you. You're not like the other white ladies. You've got a good heart. Don't let this place crush it." As evening fell, Eleanor made one final appearance at dinner with Thomas, playing the role of the chastened wife. She apologized for her outburst, claimed she'd been overcome with feminine hysteria, said she understood now that Isaac had somehow manipulated her sympathies. Thomas watched her suspiciously, but the whiskey he'd been drinking all day made him sloppy, willing to believe what he wanted to believe. "I'm glad you've come to your senses," he slurred. That boy will be dealt with tonight. You don't need to concern yourself with it anymore." Eleanor nodded meekly, excused herself, pleading a headache, and went upstairs. She dressed in the simplest clothes she owned, a dark traveling dress, sturdy boots, a heavy cloak. She bundled the supplies into a bag and waited, heart pounding, until she heard Thomas stumble to his room at midnight. When his snoring rattled through the walls, she slipped out. The barn was guarded by one of Thomas's hired men, but Eleanor had anticipated this. She approached with her head high, every inch the plantation mistress. "I need to retrieve something from the barn," she told the guard. "Mr. Whitlock's orders." The man hesitated, uncertain. Eleanor's imperious tone worked. He stepped aside, and she entered the dark interior. Isaac was exactly where they'd left him, lying on his side to keep pressure off his torn back. Eleanor knelt beside him and whispered urgently, "Isaac, wake up. We're leaving, right now." Isaac's eyes opened, clouded with fever and pain. "Eleanor, I can barely move." "You have to try." Eleanor helped him sit up, biting back tears at his groan of agony. "Thomas is going to kill you tonight. Men are coming. It's now or never." She wrapped his torn back as tightly as she could with clean cloth to staunch the bleeding, then helped him struggle into a shirt. Every movement made Isaac gasp, but he kept moving. Getting out of the barn proved easier than expected. The guard had wandered off for a smoke, and the moonless night provided deep shadows. Eleanor supported most of Isaac's weight as they stumbled toward the tree line beyond the slave quarters. They moved painfully slowly, Isaac's strength failing with each step, but they kept going. They were halfway across the open field when a shout rang out. "Hey, stop! Someone's escaping!" It was the guard, returning to his post and finding them gone. Lights blazed in the main house. Dogs began barking. Eleanor felt Isaac sag against her, his weight nearly pulling them both down. "Go," he gasped. "Leave me. Save yourself." "Never," Eleanor said fiercely. She pulled out Thomas's pistol and fired a shot in the air, not at anyone, but enough to make their pursuers hesitate, uncertain if she was armed and dangerous. In that precious moment of confusion, she hauled Isaac into the forest. The next hours blurred into a nightmare of stumbling through darkness, Isaac's blood seeping through his bandages, the sound of pursuit growing behind them. Eleanor dragged, carried, and cajoled Isaac forward, refusing to let him give up. They reached a creek and followed it to disguise their scent from the dogs. Isaac collapsed twice, and twice Eleanor got him back on his feet through sheer force of will. Dawn was breaking when they finally saw it, a small farmhouse with a hex sign painted on the barn, the Quaker safe house Ruth had described. Eleanor pounded on the door, no longer caring about stealth, just desperate for help. An elderly man answered, took one look at them, a white woman and a bloodied black man, both at the end of their strength, and said simply, "Come inside." The Quaker family, Samuel and Abigail Brennan, hid them in a root cellar beneath their barn, while Thomas Whitlock's search parties scoured the countryside. For 3 days, Eleanor and Isaac lay in that dark space, hardly daring to breathe, while above them they heard the sounds of horses, dogs, and angry men. Samuel brought food and water and tended Isaac's wounds with practiced skill, suggesting this wasn't his first time harboring runaways. Isaac fought fever and infection, his body trying desperately to heal from the brutal whipping. Eleanor stayed by his side constantly, changing his bandages, wiping his fevered brow, whispering encouragement when he seemed ready to give up. In that cramped darkness, they had nothing but each other and the terrible knowledge of what they'd done, and what they could never undo. On the 4th day, Samuel came down with news. "The search parties have moved on," he said quietly. "They think you headed west toward Alabama, but you can't stay here much longer. It's too dangerous for my family. There's a man coming tonight with a wagon. He'll take you to the next station on the Underground Railroad. From there, it's a journey of several weeks, maybe months, to reach Canada." "Canada?" Eleanor asked, her voice hoarse. "Not just the northern states?" Samuel shook his head. "Even in free states, the law requires escaped slaves to be returned to their owners. Slave catchers can still hunt you there. You won't be truly safe until you cross into Canada. And Mrs. Whitlock?" He paused uncomfortably. "You need to understand what you're walking into. You've committed a crime by helping Isaac escape. There will be warrants for your arrest. Your husband can claim you stole his property and his money. You can never come back. And even in the North, even in Canada, society won't look kindly on a white woman and a black man together. You'll face prejudice, discrimination, hatred. I'm not saying this to discourage you. I'm saying it so you know the truth." Eleanor looked at Isaac, still weak and feverish, his back a mass of healing wounds. She thought about the woman she'd been just months ago, trapped, suffocating, contemplating suicide to escape her gilded cage. She thought about the woman she was now. A criminal, a fugitive, her reputation destroyed, her family connections severed. By every measure of the society she had grown up in, she had destroyed her life. "I understand," she said, "and I'm certain." The journey north was harrowing. They traveled hidden in wagons, walked through forests at night, hid in barns and attics and cellars of sympathetic families. Quakers, free blacks, white abolitionists who risked everything to help them. Each stop on the Underground Railroad brought them closer to freedom, but also closer to capture. Twice they narrowly avoided slave catchers. Once they hid in a swamp for an entire day while search parties passed within yards of them. Isaac's back slowly healed, but the scars would mark him forever, both the physical scars and the deeper ones carved into his soul by 19 years of bondage. In a small town in Pennsylvania, 5 months after their escape, they received news through the network. Thomas Whitlock had died. He'd drunk himself into a rage over losing his wife and his property, fallen down the stairs of the plantation house, and broken his neck. The news should have brought relief, but it only brought a hollow sense of waste. So many lives destroyed by one cruel man's inability to see other humans as fully human. "Does this change anything?" Isaac asked Eleanor. "You could go back now, claim you were kidnapped, forced to help me escape. With Thomas dead, you could reclaim your life." Eleanor looked at him. At this man who'd risked everything to pull her from a burning building, who'd survived brutality she couldn't imagine, who'd shown her what it meant to truly care for another person without ownership or control. "Go back to what?" she asked. "To a society built on human bondage? To a world where the way we care for each other is considered criminal?" She took his hand, no longer afraid of the gesture. "My old life died in that fire, Isaac. This is my life now, with you, if you'll have me." Isaac pulled her close, careful of his still healing back. "I'll have you, in whatever way the world will let us." They reached Canada in late summer of 1828, settling in a small community outside Toronto where other former slaves had built new lives. They were legally married in a simple Quaker ceremony, an act that would have been illegal in Georgia, revolutionary in Canada. Eleanor took work as a teacher, her Boston education finally serving a purpose beyond social refinement. Isaac apprenticed with a blacksmith, learning a trade with hands that were finally free to build rather than just serve. But Samuel Brennan had been right about the challenges. Even in Canada, they faced suspicious stares, cruel whispers, doors that closed when they approached. Some of the other refugees couldn't understand Eleanor's choice. A white woman who'd voluntarily destroyed her privilege to be with a black man. Some white abolitionists who'd helped them to freedom were uncomfortable now seeing them as equals, as a married couple. The world they'd escaped to was better than the one they'd fled, but it wasn't the paradise they'd hoped for. On a cold November evening, their first anniversary of escape, Eleanor and Isaac sat in the small cabin they'd built with their own hands. Isaac carved pieces of wood for furniture, while Eleanor read aloud from a newspaper. Teaching Isaac to read had become their evening ritual. Outside, snow fell softly on free ground. "Do you regret it?" Isaac asked quietly. Everything you gave up? Eleanor set down the newspaper and looked at her husband, a word that still felt miraculous. His back would always bear the scars of that whipping, just as her heart would always carry the guilt of living in privilege while others suffered. They'd saved each other, yes, but they hadn't saved the dozens still enslaved on Thomas Whitlock's plantation, or the millions still in bondage across the South. Their freedom was individual, not universal, and that knowledge weighed on them both. "I regret that we live in a world where what we did was necessary," Eleanor said finally. "I regret that human decency is considered revolutionary. I regret that loving you is seen as a crime rather than a blessing. But do I regret saving you, being with you, building this life?" She moved to sit beside him, laying her head on his shoulder. "Never. Not for one moment." Isaac kissed the top of her head. "I regret that I couldn't save everyone, that my mother is still out there somewhere, if she's even alive, that children are still being born into bondage while I sit here safe. My freedom feels," he struggled for the word, "stolen, like I took something that should belong to all of us." "Then we don't just live free," Eleanor said. "We work to make others free. We tell our story. We support the abolition movement. We make sure that what we survived mattered, that it led to something more than just our personal escape." It was a promise they kept for the rest of their lives. They became active in the abolitionist movement, their story, properly sanitized for public consumption, used to illustrate the human cost of slavery. Eleanor wrote articles and pamphlets. Isaac became a powerful speaker, his first-hand testimony of slavery's brutality moving audiences to action. When the Civil War finally came decades later, they saw it as the inevitable confrontation they'd known was necessary. Evil so deeply embedded in a society's structure that only its complete destruction could root it out. They had children, 3 sons and a daughter, who grew up free in a way Isaac never had, carrying both their parents' legacies. The family faced prejudice and discrimination, but they faced it together, building a life defined not by what they'd escaped from, but by what they were creating. On Isaac's 50th birthday, he and Eleanor took a walk through the woods near their home, much as they'd once walked in secret on Thomas Whitlock's plantation. His hair was graying now, his back still marked by scars that would never fully fade. Eleanor was 55, her hands roughened by years of work so different from the life she'd been born to. "I've been thinking about that night," Isaac said. "When I ran into the fire to save you, I was so certain I was going to die, and even afterwards, when everything went so wrong, part of me thought maybe I should have just let it burn. Would have been simpler." Eleanor stopped walking and turned to face him. "Do you wish you had?" Isaac was quiet for a long moment, looking at the woman who'd chosen him when the world said she shouldn't, who'd thrown away everything to run into the darkness with him, whose stubbornness and courage had saved them both. "No," he said finally. "God help me, but I'd run into that fire again. I'd take the whipping again. I'd run through those woods again, because it led to this, to us, to freedom. It shouldn't have been necessary. None of it should have been necessary. But given the world as it was, I'd make the same choice every time." Eleanor took his hand, their fingers interlacing as they had that first night in the slave quarters. "So would I," she said. "So would I." They walked on through the Canadian woods, 2 people who'd saved each other when saving seemed impossible, whose forbidden love had been a small act of rebellion against an entire system of inhumanity. Their story wouldn't change the world alone. That would take a war and generations of struggle still to come. But their story mattered, a testament to the possibility that even in the darkest circumstances, humans could choose connection over cruelty, freedom over fear, love over law. Behind them, the path through the woods disappeared into shadow. Ahead, the setting sun gilded the trees with light, and between those 2 certainties, the darkness they'd escaped and the uncertain future they were building. Isaac and Eleanor walked together, free at last, paying every day the price and reaping every day the reward of the choice they'd made one desperate night in Georgia. To save each other, and in doing so, to save themselves.